Then in welcoming to the stage Shevaun Haviland, Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, and Stuart Patrick, Chief Executive of the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. Let's give them a very warm welcome. Now, Stuart and Shevaun, firstly, thank you for being here for the final session of the day. This is an opportunity for us, I think, to take stock and also to look forward and to think about how we take this agenda as we move forward. So we've heard a lot today about some of the innovations that businesses are taking, the relationships that they have with customers, the focus on the supply chain that we just heard about. We heard a bit about the role of investors earlier on. I just want to ask you both, starting with you, Shevaun, what do you think is really the state of play then? How would you take the temperature of British business and the transition pathway? Is it gathering momentum or is it stuck?
Hi everybody, great to see you. We're saving the best to last, aren't we, Stuart? Yeah. I feel very Madonna with this headpiece on. I feel like I should break into a bit of Vogue, but I won't.
Don't feel inhibited. It's your stage.
If you've heard my singing, you know that I shan't be breaking into Vogue. So it's a really great question, and the good news is that we have done a lot of research with our members to ask them how they feel about this. As representing the British Chambers of Commerce, we have 53 chambers all over the UK, and now, as of this week, Mexico joined us. We have 80 British chambers all over the world, so it's quite an incredible network. So what are they telling us? Who here can measure a carbon footprint? Put your hand up, measure carbon footprint. Yeah, so basically three people. So only about 10% of businesses say that they have measured, SMEs say they have measured their carbon footprint. And that is because most of them don't know how to do it. I mean, who in your building is going to do it? The office manager, I don't know, someone's EA, so you don't have the capability. But also, what businesses are worried about is they're going to get a report back and it's going to say, you need to spend 100 grand on new lighting, solar panels, whatever it may be. Well, you probably don't have 100 grand tucked away, so I'm going to put that in a slightly too difficult box for a while. Now, having said all that, very pessimistically, actually, our latest research we did with one of the big banks showed that 80% of businesses are taking some steps. So they are taking steps to reduce their carbon footprint and increase their efficiency. So I think that's a really good sign. To go back to the slightly surprising again, 21% of businesses said that they thought moving towards net zero was going to make them more inefficient. So, and we think that's about something like, if I move my fleet to electric fleet, where am I going to plug it in? I have to plug it in overnight. Can my drivers take it home? That sounds like it's driving inefficiencies into my, business processes. So, some positive signs, but definitely some tricky things to overcome as we're in this transition, effectively.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. And so I suppose the key question there, Shevaun, is whether those concerns can be addressed. But we'll come back to that. Stuart, do you want to give us your temperature take? Are we gathering momentum or are we stuck?
I think we're gathering momentum, but and I absolutely defer to Shevaun's stats on this in terms of the research. I guess our impression would be a kind of schizophrenic attitude towards the situation. Because on the one hand, there would be a real enthusiasm for tackling climate change and net zero within the business model, within the business process itself. For example, we have in the chamber just now a project that the council leader Susan Aiken referred to, Step Up to Net Zero. It's a very simple and straightforward process to bring in a young, or in fact a person of any age actually, in for a 4-month work placement to work with the company on developing their net zero action plan. And that has had an enormous uptake, not just, I have to say, from the companies, but also from the people who are looking to see if they can get those work placements. You can imagine right now that companies are really desperate to find skills. It's a really challenging issue. Recruitment processes have been very difficult. But for those 40 places, we had 500 applications to fill those places. An amazing response. So we find areas where the attitude of both business and those who want to tackle climate change as individuals has got real momentum. On the other hand, we find lots of issues that come through regulation where there's real discontent. I don't really need to mention deposit return scheme in Scotland without knowing that that is going to cause, in certain parts of the business community, considerable grief. It's not the principle of achieving the end goal, it's the manner in which it's delivered. So that schizophrenia of, we want to achieve this, but when it's forced on us in a way that we can't quite work within our model, then I think we create more problems than we would like.
Thank you very much. There seems to be a kind of a measure of agreement here that there's an aspiration to do things, but there are some real practical challenges. So the obvious question back to you both, starting with you, Shevaun, is what's the role of business leadership organisations like chambers of commerce then? Is there a way that you can engage practically in helping businesses to accelerate and to deal with the challenges that you mentioned?
Yes, that is the good news. We at the Chambers of Commerce are here to help, right, Stuart? So I would say there's sort of 3 ways that we're doing that. One is what you might call very practical intervention. So great example that's happening here in Glasgow. So it's about education. A lot of the chambers run sort of training schemes. What does net zero even mean? How do I even begin to think about that? And often for my sector, specific to sector, practical interventions. So there's genuinely a real shortage of people who can go out and measure your carbon footprint for you. So the chambers are beginning to do that more and more. That's sort of, I guess, on the net zero side. In Kent, for example, they've just worked with their local authority to give out grants, 10k grants for energy efficiency. And that's been hugely successful. You saw that the question on financial incentives, yes. that was the favoured, probably not surprising, but they start you on that journey, even though clearly 10k is not going to get you all the way. Second, we say the sort of flip side of the coin for net zero is green innovation. So this is a huge opportunity for UK PLC, right? New products and services in this space. McKinsey estimates it's going to be worth £1 trillion to the UK by 2030. I mean, that is something that we need to get behind. So East Lancashire Chamber, for example, is running an accelerator called Red Cat, which helps those developing new products and services, helps find financing, helps with some of those tricky things we heard earlier as well about planning, engagement with the local authority. And then lastly, on the national agenda, it's about policy development. So it's about what are the policies that are in place or new ones we can put in place to remove some of the obstacles you've been hearing about. I chair an advisory group on business for the Climate Change Committee. The Climate Change Committee is a UK government statutory body set up to track progress on the 2050 targets, 2030 targets that we set. That is about what can business do more, but it's also about where government can help to make that move faster. Hearing from Keith this morning about speed and how you can. Someone described this to me the other day as we are back in Victorian times where everybody wants to build a railway from London to Scotland, but there aren't any bridges. So we've got to get those built first. Do think it was quite a good analogy, but I think we could build the bridges a bit more quickly. So policy change and then market making. So what we've been saying to national government is, you have a huge procurement budget, you have a massive estate that needs retrofitted. What are you doing about that? And if you could indicate that you were going to retrofit your whole government estate, you would literally be making a market in SMEs who could do retrofitting, heat pumps, et cetera, So use the government procurement budget to build markets, to build businesses. So
fantastic. And What sort of response do you get to these rather brilliant ideas?
So, well, it won't escape your attention that we've had a couple of governments in the last year or so. We were in number 10 yesterday with the PM's new business advisor and Kevin Hollerake, who's the business minister, and very, very receptive. And all the things we've heard today were coming up. Again, Keith talking about building wind farms and ensuring we have the supply chains on land before we start building them. But actually that regulatory environment of you need to give us clarity, certainty, and then we will have the confidence to invest to make that happen. Right. So positive noises, just have to keep knocking at the door, right?
Yes, very, very interesting. Stuart, over to you, same question. What's the role of business leadership organisations here, given what Glasgow has been doing? And by the way, before you answer, there's a little message in the room. There are plenty of attendees here from both businesses and placements in the Step Up to Net Zero project, and they're sending a big smiley face.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. I thought I might answer that question by referring right back to near the beginning when we were talking about whether climate change was an add-on to your business model or was a central part of your business model. And I'd say to answer that question that increasingly we are understanding as a Chamber of Commerce that it's absolutely central to who we are. What do we do as a Chamber of Commerce? And I thought I might tackle that with what did we do at COP26? That gives you a flavour of how we embed the whole issues of climate change into the work of the Chamber of Commerce. So we tackled our role as a host city and as a host city chamber by saying, well, there's maybe 4 pillars of work that we need to do. One was about engaging, bringing the community, the business community together with business leaders from all around the world who are sharing their experiences on delivering against their own net zero targets, responding to climate change. We have in the Chamber a Circular Glasgow network of 300 individuals from all our company base who are devoted to championing the achievement of circular economy goals. So we used that network and we used the wider membership's interest in COP26 to make those connections with people who could tell our members how they're going on their journey. So that collaboration with leadership, that connectivity with others in the business community is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 was international trade. It's a fundamental part of who a Chamber of Commerce is, or what a Chamber of Commerce is. And so we decided to hold what turned out for us to be the very biggest inward trade delegation that we've ever hosted in this city. We had 175 delegates from 15 countries and 85 companies, all focused around renewable technologies. It was all around that agenda, and we have since taken that forward. We've started a platform we've called Climate Chamber City to help that network to grow through constant interconnection, and now adding more and more companies into the platform that we've established. And almost all of our trade missions now are focused on aspects of climate change. So we took a trade mission to Germany on green hydrogen. We've been to Norway with renewable tech. We've been to New York with sustainable fashion. So there's a whole agenda developing around that traditional trading role that chambers play. The third one we've already mentioned, which was around skills and the connection between the education system and the business community. And we held a programme of work during COP called My Climate Path, which was aimed at schools. It was bringing senior business champions, green champions, quite often from our Circular Glasgow network, into those schools to show how might you develop a career in tackling climate change in a way that would give you a job that was sustainable. So that was that ended up with a conference at Glasgow Caledonian University with over 400 youngsters mixing with some of the Circular Glasgow network on the final day of COP26. And then the final pillar is in the way it's in that policy lobbying territory. We chose as a chamber a set of projects that we think are important to the long-term economic success of Glasgow. And at least half of those projects have got climate change right at their heart. So one of them on its own is helping the City Council deliver that green print for investment that Councillor Aiken was talking about earlier. Another one is delivering the Climate Neutral Innovation District, which is part of Strathclyde University's Innovation District in the centre of the city, and so on. So we've converted our lobbying approach, our lobbying power, into a set of projects, most of which will be important in tackling the city's aims for climate change. So we've embedded it, as I hope we can show that we've embedded that into the core work of the Chamber.
So I think I heard you say innovation, trade, skills, major projects, all of them with a climate focus. And that's what you did to make sense of being the business leadership organisation in the host city of COB. I'm going to come back to the questions that I sent you in advance, but we've got lots of questions here from the delegates, so I'd like to get into those. Some of these might be quite quick. So, Shevaun, one of the questions here is, do the chambers have any intention of requiring or even encouraging their members to commit to any kind of science-based targets on climate or on net zero? Is it something that's in your minds or in the ether at the moment?
I mean, it's definitely around helping people get there. I mean, science-based targets are really hard, so we welcome everybody in and want to help them on the journey.
Good. Stuart?
I'll come into I'll say schizophrenia again. One of the challenges, well, we did measure our carbon footprint. Stupidly, we measured our carbon footprint in 2021.
Right.
You can imagine what we were all doing in 2021. We were all sitting at home dealing with the pandemic. Therefore, our carbon footprint at that time was virtually zero. It's really, really difficult to move on from zero. So this was not the best year to choose to set your target. So we do now have to come back to that and look at it again. But it told us a couple of things. Yeah. And it told us a couple of things about activity that we might have to look at in the future when we were coming back to normal business activity. One of which was flights. Now again, this is where schizophrenia comes in. Glasgow Airport is a very, very good member of the Chamber. International trade is one of the issues that our membership at senior level raises on a constant basis. It's probably the number 2 topic that comes to the Chamber from the members. How do we get direct flights to the markets that we're selling our goods and services into? So how does the Chamber tackle that challenge that we shouldn't use international flights? The answer to that is no, we can't. That's not something we can commit to. Yeah. What we can do, though, is work alongside Glasgow Airport and the airlines on their projects for tackling their contribution to climate change. And I think in particular, we're very strong with Glasgow Airport, who have put an enormous amount of effort into tackling climate change with their plans, whether that's through their examination of hydrogen, or they're looking at the sustainable aviation fuels, or in particular, part of their challenge is the number of journeys to the airport done by private vehicles. So not too surprisingly, we're supporting public transport offers that might connect the airport to its wider city region.
And I'm sure that's one of the projects in the 4th category.
Yes, yeah. It is.
Let's tackle another question, because Shevaun, there's a key question here about access to the skills needed for the transition. And the way the question is framed here is, how prepared are recruitment agencies and employment bureaus and all the rest of it to source the green skills and the jobs and put them together? But maybe you want to take the opportunity to comment more widely on what the skills transition is going to need to be to really affect this transition, whether it's the plumbers who need to be able to do ground source heat pumps, or whether it's all of the workers who'll need to do the building retrofits, or whether it's shifting towards more sustainable logistics. How do you see the skills challenge, and are agencies or intermediaries part of the solution?
The skills challenge, as many of you will be facing every day, is huge, full stop, before you even begin to get to green skills. So I'm going on the radio tonight, 5 o'clock, to do PM. And funnily enough, they want to talk about skills and immigration because it's, top of the news agenda down in Westminster. So we've got 1 million open roles in this country. I travel across the country as I am doing today. I talk to businesses, and apart from maybe their energy bills, the other number one thing they talk about is not being able to get people. And if you can't get people, you can't grow your business. In fact, we've just finished our latest recruitment survey, which said that 50% of them are saying that they are basically under-delivering, under-supplying, because they can't get people. So this is an anti-growth story. So real issue, skills in general. And obviously green skills. Talking to SMEs, it's quite hard for small and medium-sized businesses to recognise even the skills that they don't have now, never mind what they're not going to have in 5 years' time. So across England, and Stuart will have to talk to skills in Scotland for me, but across England, the chambers are running a thing called local skills improvement plans, and it's finished year 1 of 3. And that is them working with local businesses to say, what skills do you need now, and what do you need in the future? And by the way, businesses don't actually talk about skills. They talk about jobs, roles, things that people need to do. So what skills do you need now and in the future? And then they're working with local skills providers, FE colleges, HE colleges, to say, those are the things we need to teach. And unsurprisingly, green skills or skills for future green economy are coming out top of that list. So there are things ongoing, but I think it's going to be hard.
Thank you very much. And I want to put another question to Shevaun, if I may, Stuart, because then I'm going to come back to you on a heap of more locally focused questions. But there's another question here, Shevaun, which is about, basically this is from Johnny Casey. Thank you, Johnny. There's lots of talk about carbon footprint and net zero, but what's your perception of how aware businesses are of their own climate risks? Whether it's flooding, whether it's heating, whether it's continuous access to power. How aware are businesses amongst the broad British Chamber's membership of the climate risks that they face, in your view?
Yeah, it's actually not something that we've done a lot of research on, which I think we should do more of, because adaptation and mitigation, which is basically what you're talking about, is coming up more and more. And, our view of talking to people would be, not a lot, very little. So if we take the particularly high temperatures of last summer, when people suddenly realised that, their aircon wasn't very good, or people couldn't get on the train or the tube or the bus because it was just unbearably hot, so people were staying at home, and you had to then reconfigure some of your business processes again. And that was only, 8 months ago, and people were taken by surprise. And that's going to keep coming. And I think the Environment Agency, has been a very vocal advocate of mitigation and adaptation around flooding, depending on where your business is. So I think we'll find that businesses have done not enough at all.
Right, very, very helpful. Let's have a quick shout out then. Where's Adam? Adam, are you here? If so, could you raise your hand? Or maybe you're joining on. There's Adam. So Adam, thank you very much for this. You've built a carbon estimator to get a business's carbon footprint in under 5 minutes, and you're looking for beta testers. Please find you if you're interested here at the end, and you're in a white floral shirt. So this man has an estimator for you.
Very good.
Okay, so make sure you connect with Adam at the end. Stuart, there's 3 or 4 questions about hosting COP and all of that. But just before we get there, Step Up to Net Zero is very widely appreciated by some people in the room. Not surprising, they're very much involved. They want to know if we could develop it into a much longer term program of connecting people into all of these small businesses that are going through this process of stepping up to net zero. Can we make it more permanent? Can we make it more long term? Can we keep the people with them for longer? What's the potential there?
I would be absolutely delighted if we could. It's Glasgow City Council that have provided the funding for Step Up to Net Zero. We're going through what we always call a pilot process. I think every project that you do in economic development is always a pilot. And it is always the holy grail to turn that pilot into a sustained model. And I think we have one possible route into doing that through shared prosperity funding, that if we can settle with the City Council how that might work with their programme, then the proof, I think, of the success of this step up to net zero round should be incredibly powerful in setting out at least a 2 to 3 year programme that we can sustain at a much higher scale as well. So we're very, very keen. We hope to succeed in our discussions with local partners in the next few months.
And I'm sure you're going to make sure the message gets to Susan. And then there's one more for you, Stuart, then I'll come back to Shevaun, and then we'll get on to talking about the future. Scottish Enterprise has announced that SMEs will not be eligible for funding from them if they don't have a net zero roadmap. Firstly, what do you think about that? And do you think that the chambers should now step up, as it were, and have a similar commitment for their members?
To the former, I would say I think that's a pretty appropriate approach from public sector agencies. They are devoting public government funds to the development of the individual companies. I think they're entitled to set particular obligations on them. They do anyway. They've previously set obligations for employment or for turnover growth, or there will be some measure that is usually associated with a grant or a loan or equity support. I don't see any reason why they can't expand that into net zero. And no, we won't do that as a chamber, because we're here to try and take everybody on that journey. I think trying to put barriers in the way for those that are perhaps still needing persuaded is the last thing we should do. We should be trying to welcome everybody in and winning them over through examples that we see in our wider membership.
So you won't be boycotting any of your members?
No, absolutely, no. Absolutely not.
Funnily enough.
No, great. Shevaun, if we may, there's a big question here from Miranda Barker. Thank you, Miranda. How can the UK and its businesses compete with Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which is making massive cash injections to ensure low-carbon innovations are manufactured there in the US? How can we set up anything competitive in that context? And I guess we could add in the European Green Deal as well here, and we could add in the Chinese Green Deal too, that, Europe, China, the USA have massive fiscal programs now around this, and we don't yet. What can we do about that?
Thank you, Miranda Barker, who's listening. She's the CEO of the East Lancashire Chamber, so I'll get my sticky paws on. No, it's a good question, Miranda. So clearly, we can't compete with the level of subsidies of ERA from the US and now probably the EU. But I was delighted to hear Keith talk about this earlier. We can compete. We need to stand up and we need to show loud and proud leadership in this space, because we are innovators. We are innovators. We have incredible universities. We have incredible talent. We can commercialise new ideas. And if you take wind, I think we are still just about leaders in wind energy, on floating and non-floating, which was driven by the Contracts for Difference innovation, effectively, policy framework, actually, to drive that market. And that's a great example of the sort of things that we can do. And because we are the size we are, we can be more joined up and we can do it quickly. We're not doing that at the moment, by the way, but we can. So that's where we can really stand out and be different.
Great, thank you very much. That is really clear, isn't it? It's about the way we go about doing it and how we use what we have got.
Yeah.
Indeed. Now, Stuart, I want to come back to the whole issue of COP and hosting COP and having intergovernmental conferences about this. I suppose there are a question here in two parts. I mean, from your view, having been here all the way through COP, and I'm sure Shevaun was here at certain points as well, how useful is it to have these intergovernmental conferences in a city? Does it make a difference? And then what did you learn about what a business leadership organisation can do to really engage business in that process? You've talked about what you did, but what did you learn from doing it?
Right. Well, perhaps to take first the suggestion that these conferences are important, and I think I think they are. Not just to the cities, they're just important.
Yeah.
Simply because it's a bit like going to church, really. You need to be reminded pretty regularly what it is that you've got to live up to in your values. And these are the moments, these annual moments, when you really do give it a good look through. We as a chamber, therefore, I think equally, we're not here to lecture. I think that was said earlier as well. Not the lecturing, the hectoring. It's the listening, actually, if anything. It's the listening and facilitating. If we can do that regularly in events like this, to hear what the challenges are that our business community face in order to tackle their goals, and then we can either take that back to our collective membership to come forward with fresh proposals, or we go to those that are better positioned in government or in larger organisations to help us to do that, so be it. So I would tend to think that the biggest lesson I learned from COP26 was not to be overawed by the scale of the challenge that was being laid out. I think it is useful to be told how grim the situation is, but it's equally really important to be able to find some route that you personally, as an individual, or you as a company, can take in order to contribute. So I certainly felt at COP26, because the business community turned up at COP26 and you saw the GFANZs being created, that you could get a sense that, yeah, there's purchase on this, you can get some agency in this, you can feel you can make a contribution. So the big lesson for me was, don't think you can't make a contribution to an event of the scale of COP.
Now, I'm going to come on to ask you both in a minute, what should we do next? The British Chambers of Commerce and the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce have been the founding partners of this initiative here today. But Shevaun, is there anything you want to add that you think is important from British business as a whole? Was hosting COP important for British business? And how did you feel on reflection about how business played its role?
I think business involvement in COP is vital. In fact, it's fundamental. So the international chambers of commerce, of which we are members, are the only non-governmental organisation that's set on the UN. And they have a huge presence there. And last year in Egypt, when they put out the draft, what do they call the draft words around the negotiation, almost every type of organisation was mentioned in it, except business, which is just completely mental. I mean, SMEs are roughly 60% of the total emissions around the world. And businesses are innovators. They are the ones that come up with the answers. They're the accelerators. They're the ones who drive change. 220 of us signed a letter led by the B team and got that changed in Egypt in the moment last year. And, you know, I think we're really excited about COP28, about Dubai. It's radical in the respect of where it is in the fossil fuels and so on. And so I think it's going to be really, really interesting. But business have been turning up more and more. Glasgow showed, I think, the first time they were really there en masse. We see more and more of it. It's fundamental that we're there, that our voices are heard, that we are not just sharing best practice so everyone, well, we are sharing best practice so everyone can do more and more of the same. And we can listen to people like our first speaker from NatWest, who I thought delivered terrible news really beautifully, but actually really eloquently. And I think those are the sort of stories we need to keep hearing.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was a very sobering start to the day, but the point you and Stuart are making is actually we need to rebase all of the time and think about what's required. But your point about the role of business in this is absolutely obvious, isn't it? So that leads me to the next question, which is, having convened this event today and all of the work that's gone with it, how are we going to follow this up? What do you think should happen next? Where can British Chambers of Commerce and Glasgow Chamber of Commerce work together? How can we turn this into exactly what Shevaun was just saying, a mechanism to insert business into this dialogue? So, Shevaun, do you want to start and then we'll come to Stuart?
You go, Stuart, first.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, we've started this event
yes.
as a part of a wider city partnership.
Yeah.
We want, Susan was saying earlier, Glasgow Climate Week. We have an all-energy conference that comes every year that looks at renewable technologies. We want to add specifically a business voice beyond renewable tech. We want to look at the whole business contribution,
right.
And we want to use this vehicle as part of that. And we want to bring business from around the world to this in due course. This is the first one. We want to build it to become an international event. But we also, as chambers, and I think all chambers, will want to carry on embedding the challenges of climate change into every aspect of the work that they do. So again, for us, COB becomes the church moment, the moment when we come every year to ask, how have we got on? Have we made the promise? Have we delivered rather on the promises that we were making?
So you're holding yourselves to account in a certain way. And so I think what you just said is that there's going to be a Glasgow Climate Week. You have the All Energy Conference every year. You're now going to add COB to that as an annual event. And in the longer term, bring in international businesses and others. Shevaun, have you got appetite for that?
I mean, we work really close together. We're absolutely behind it. That's what we want to do. We want to bring our 53 UK chambers together, our 80 international chambers together, and other partners. I mean, we ran a global conference last week, didn't we? I mean, it wasn't, we covered all of the economy on that one, but we had the Chancellor, we had Andrew Bailey, we had Keir Starmer, we had Martha. So, we could do the same with the Green Agenda. And, someone said it again this morning, I know we talk about it amongst our other economic challenges, but you sort of do feel like if your planet's on fire, nothing else really matters, does it? So we should probably fix that first.
That's a very important final statement, actually. If the planet's on fire, nothing else really matters. We better fix that first. Any other thing that either of you want to say on all of this before I close this down?
I just say, first of all, to those of you who have stuck it there on your seats that I know are furiously uncomfortable, that is one hell of an achievement and should be, I think we should have a wee certificate, I think, to give you at the end for that. But really a genuine thank you for contributing today and for helping us along this path. We will hope that you'll stick with us and help us grow this event into something the way that we just described.
Brilliant.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. One of the best things about doing this is I hear what's going on around the country, so that when I go back to Westminster and talk to, pick a politician, I can tell these stories, because data is obviously crucial, but actually being able to tell the stories of amazing things that are going on around the country is crucial. So thank you.
Great. So what we're going to do now then is we're firstly going to have a big round of applause, not just for Shevaun and for Stuart, but for the British Chambers of Commerce and the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce for doing this, making it happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then picking up on Stuart's suggestion, let's have a round of applause for everyone who's sitting on these rather hard chairs. So, Shevaun and Stuart, if you're happy to sit still for 2 minutes, I'm just going to close the conference. And what I'm going to say firstly is that this is the first time that any business leadership organisation in any COP hosting city has said, we're going to do something to take this forward and build a longer term, a more permanent agenda with our members and with our most important partners, including the British Chamber. So I think, from an inspiration point of view and from a commitment to do the right thing point of view, thank you, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and all of the partners that made it possible for you. I was trying to summarise at the beginning of the day, if some people remember, the role of government. It was to regulate, was to create the right policies and incentives, and was to invest. The role of cities was to convene, was to nudge and shape and change behaviour, and it was to lead the urban transition. And I said the role of business was to innovate, to trade, and to build sustainable markets. And I think what you've heard today is a lot of examples of how to innovate, how to trade, and how to build sustainable markets. But what Shevaun and Stuart have just added to that is how to convene effectively as business organisations, how to take a leadership role but being member-led rather than being policy-led or regulation-led or target-led, which I think was very important. Stuart said how to listen and how to facilitate, which I think was very important. And then Shevaun just said, of course, how to rapidly share good practice, how to not just innovate in one place, but to make sure the benefits of innovation are shared within a nation, but also across an international network of chambers of commerce and others. And I think for all of those reasons, it's very clear that what's been happening here today has a meaning, has a purpose, has a relevance, and I think has a future. And then Stuart has already said very clearly that the idea then is that this was the first COB. You were here. When we ask in the future who was at the first one, you'll be able to say you were. But next year, I think in something like the second or third week of May. 14th of May. Next year, 14th of May, in the middle of Glasgow Climate Week, adjacent to the All Energy Conference, which will be on the preceding 2 days, as I understand it, there will be COB2. And COB2 will be able to pick up not just the lessons from Dubai and COP28 and what's happened, the experience of that, but everything that happens between now and May the 14th next year and all of the opportunities to build on that. And for that, I think we must just thank you for the opportunity, as you say, to at least once a year hold ourselves to account. But on the other hand, in the 364 days in between, to make sure we do the things that we know we need to do. So with that, I'd like to close the conference with thanks again to the Glasgow Chamber and the British Chambers of Commerce and all of the partners, and say thank you very much for being here. The conference is closed.